So you're about to introduce a new NPC to the party, and you are certain that no matter what you intended for this NPC to add to your story, your resident bard is going to try to seduce them no matter what. While some DMs and players find these scenes hilarious, others, like this guy, are a lot less enthused. So how do you deal with these situations where you have players that are really into role-playing their characters' romantic encounters when you and maybe the other players are not into it at all? If you're cool with this at your table, then by all means go for it. Have fun. But if you're like me, and I'm guessing plenty of others out there, these scenes are just uncomfortable. So if these in-game romance scenes make you cringe as much as they make me cringe, then stick around. We're going to talk about some ways to dodge them altogether, or at least make them a little more bearable. First, let's get the obvious out of the way. The obvious advice here is to make sure that you talk with your table mates. And just make sure everybody at the table is aware that that type of scene is not something that you enjoy. Any decent group of players will respect your wishes and either keep it amongst themselves so you don't have to participate directly, or maybe avoid it altogether. But let's entertain the idea for a moment that even though in-game romance makes you uncomfortable, you still want to humor your players to a certain extent. This is actually where I fall on the issue. It isn't a deal breaker to me, but I do try to avoid the whole romance piece in-game because I don't particularly enjoy it myself. It typically doesn't bother me when players are playing out romances between themselves, but when it comes to a player and an NPC that I'm having to take the role of, it's just not really my thing. So here are a few techniques that I use to make those scenes a little more comfortable for me when players do pursue them. First, try switching to third-person descriptions. One thing that does make me more comfortable in these scenes when they come up is to drop out of playing the character myself. When I switch from voicing the character to describing a character in third person and their reactions and their interactions, it's just a lot less personal. Instead of interacting one-on-one with your player and having to either flirt back or try to snub some unwanted advances, you're just narrating the scene as if you were a bystander. Granted, this type of scene can still get uncomfortable, but at least you're putting a degree of separation between yourself and the character who's being seduced, or flirted with, or whatever. Keep in mind that if you're trying out this technique and it still feels a little too uncomfortable, it's really easy to transition to the next technique, which is fading to black. Using this technique is really simple. You just signal to your players narratively that whatever's about to happen between these two characters is going to happen off screen. You can literally use a statement like, "And with that we fade to black, and we pick our story back up in the morning after our bard has had his fun." This technique gives you a really simple way to bypass the most awkward parts of those scenes, but still let the character entertain the fantasy within their own mind of whatever their character got up to. Essentially, it still happens in the story itself. It can be part of the lore, it can be a part of a plot hook that you're building up to, it can be part of character development, but you don't have to go through the motions of actually detailing the specifics of that scene, or worse, acting it out. Ugh. I do want to reiterate before we finish up that while these techniques have worked for me in the past, they're not for everyone. The best way to make sure that you avoid this type of discomfort in your game is to have open discussions with the other people at your table about boundaries. And if you found this helpful, I want to encourage you to check out my other tips for DMs and players over in this playlist, which I'll link up here. Until next time, have an awesome time gaming, and good luck avoiding those cringy romance scenes in your games.